Good morning, everybody. A little bit of morning for myself. I broke down on the 407. Had to get the tow truck, all of it. The truck's going in the shop here at 8 a.m., so hopefully it's not too serious. But looks like I have the day, and this post is late, but what do? That's life, and you just roll with the punches. But I'm going to get into the video today here that I wanted to do yesterday, but timing and everything. So the G7, as we all know, Joe Biden's in the UK right now. He's going on his tour, and of course that is mostly the G7 and former member Russia, which Biden plans to continue on his international trip there. But what I want to do here is talk about energy. Global energy, specifically this G7 that everyone says the wealthiest democracies in the world. And of course, it was the G8, now it's the G7. Russia out in 2014 officially over Crimea. And why I get into this is very simple. Of the remaining G7 countries, three of them, which is France, UK, and USA, all have full proliferation capability and allowances. Not a lot of people pick up on this, and it's detrimental to the remaining members of the G7 when we talk about the Green New Deal. And now I've released the absolute facts of nuclear. I've been working on this for 2 years. You can actually go through my timeline and you can catch me at the Economic Education Forum that was held in Alberta by my friend Danny Hozak. And we had Canada's expert in nuclear there to talk all about nuclear. However, there was a problem that day, which I brought up with him, and he had no answer at all. Almost as if he already knew the answer, but he was going to lead his own agenda, the G7 agenda. Now, I'm going to break down the countries. I'm going to break those countries down for you, and I'm going to explain what happened during Pierre Elliott Trudeau's time in office. We're going back to the 70s and what changed in energy, and that was proliferation. And Canadians, actually all members of the G7 outside of the P5, which is the highest tier in the world, is the P5, the Permanent Security Council members of the UN. General Assembly will often try to minimize the P5. However, that is wrong. And the more we do that worldwide, the worse countries are going to be. They're going to be worse. And we can just look today at this presentation of the G7, and everyone's welcome to go look for themselves. You're going to find out everything I'm telling you is 100% accurate, verifiable, and easily researched when you go to the proper locations to get the answers. And all we have to do is just start with energy. Energy makes the world go around. Those who have energy and can net trade energy do extremely well. Energy comes in many forms. When we look at natural resources, non-renewables, there's even arguments on that, whether something's non-renewable or not. We see taxation structures pop up worldwide. They talk about carbon, they talk about pollution. There's pollution from many industries, many industries. However, it seems a global push to target specific energy generators, non-renewables, fossil fuels, all kinds of stuff. Now, not all countries are the same. Not all countries are the same. And yes, there are those who don't have the ability to make energy, so they have to look at alternative measures. They've always had to. Now, that could be sugarcane, bio, that could be nuclear, which there's nothing wrong with nuclear. When you get into proliferation and non-proliferation, there's a huge divide here. And that's all about enrichment. Those allowed to enrich as of the 70s and those who are not. Now we can look at the G7 right now. Since the 70s, since those five powers decided, look, nobody's going to be able to enrich uranium besides us. Everybody else must stay unenriched or at such low quality and quantities that they can't ever get nuclear weapons. That's forbidden worldwide outside of the five. That means only Russia, United States, France, UK, and China are allowed to proliferate. Meaning, when they have a nuclear reaction in full fusion for their energy, they can run their nuclear reactors 30 to 60 years without ever touching their fuel source, meaning they don't have to change rods. Now, sometimes things happen where there's shutdowns or other maintenance issues. That becomes an issue. But the reality is, for those nuclear reactors, they run a very long time. They're very efficient and cost effective. When you get into nuclear waste and maintenance and man hours and operations, we look at Canada and the CANDU unenriched uranium, which we have to really strain all of our enriched ore, which 90%, you can look this up, 90% of it goes to P5 countries for pennies on the dollar. It's a very rare source of uranium, but we're not allowed to use any of that ore for ourselves because it comes out of the ground at already 20%. The formulas needed for the various enriched processes come right out of that ore. Canada can't use it, not for themselves. This is the same for other G7 members. This is the same for Italy. This is the same for Germany. This is the same for Japan. Now you can look. Now we're just going to go through each country. I'm going to save Canada for last. I just wanted to give that little tidbit. But so there was a time when everybody proliferated through the 50s and 60s. All kinds of countries did. We can look at Israel, who made weapons, India, who made weapons, as well as nuclear technologies. However, when the 70s hit, non-proliferation took over. All those countries were forced, including those members of the G7. Now, what's happened since then? Well, Japan's been running reactors that they built in the 60s, which they have 52 of them. Only 9 are operational today. Japan is a massive net importer of energy now. Massive net importer. Now, with that situation, why is Japan not importing Canada's CANDU reactors? Why is the tens of thousands, everybody, tens of thousands of energy power plants in this world, tens and tens and tens of thousands, why are only 10 CANDU reactors sold from Canada and nobody's placed an order for many, many years? Why is that? Well, cost analysis. How much does it cost you to take a CANDU reactor and get unenriched uranium and all the maintenance and all the costs plus the abundant amounts of toxic waste generated in a non-proliferation state? Because you're getting that kind of material made anyway. There's massive radioactive materials made from unenriched process and constant changing of cells. Massive monies. Now, Ontario is subsidized through its taxpayers as well as centralization money from the rest of the country. Hence why, besides New Brunswick, which was another thing at the time, who else is using those reactors? Well, nobody in Canada. There was no cost-benefit analysis. When you look at natural gas, coal, and you go on and on, you would be crazy to entertain unenriched uranium. The cost of your energy exceeds what other sources are abundantly available to you. That is reality, not just for Canada, but the entire world. Now, What is Germany doing right now? They had enriched uranium and reactors all the way up to the 60s. It's all being shelved. Merkel and Germany are now pursuing Russia and the natural gas pipelines. A G7 who voted for G8, Russia, to be thrown out, have now made a deal with Russia for Russia to supply all their natural gas. Because Germany doesn't want to go from enriched. All the reactors are getting old. They have to be decommissioned. They're not going to go into non-proliferation because it's not economically viable. Your energy system, which energy powers everything in this world, the richest countries have energy. That's reality. Nothing else. Your economy runs on your ability to generate energy, how efficient you are at it. Germany won't go non-proliferation, so they're replacing that system with none other than natural gas, the most economical, best way for energy going forward. That's what Germany's doing. That's the deal they're going with. They're not going with the Green New Deal as defined by USA, France, and UK, China and Russia, although Russia's not going with it either. They're saying, no, that won't work for us. We will have a huge economic disadvantage. We're going to switch to natural gas. We're going to go with Russia. And they're building a pipeline right now. That has been on the docket for more than 10 years. Italy is also decommissioning all the reactors. You can look, all done through the 50s, put in place by the 60s. Non-proliferation comes in the 70s. As these plants dwindle down, what's Italy doing? Oh, they're not going to do it either. They're in league with getting the Russian narrative and the Germany pipeline. You can look at a map of the G7. They're going to go along with Russia too. Okay. Now let's look at Japan. Again, Japan is a net importer of energy. 52 nuclear reactors, most built in the 60s, all coming to an end, all being decommissioned, not able to move forward with enriched uranium. Have you looked at the debt to GDP ratio of Japan? Have you looked at the astronomical cost of living of Japan? Are you watching right now the economic crumbling of Japan? Who are they going to go with? Well, there's China and the new Asian partnership, which has Japan in there. Japan's not going with UK, France, and USA. They're going with China. They would rather go with China and work out energy superiority that way than following the G7 members, which are actually G3, who are all able to proliferate as much as they want, and nobody else is. Led in the Green New Deal because wind, solar, besides UK, Northern Ireland, and all of the offshore there, which has a steady wind supply, that works for UK. But USA already, even in their much better climate than Canada or Japan, they're not going with wind and solar. That's only a tiny, tiny portion, not even viable to do any kind of energy transition. So they must supplement it with massive, fully advanced, enriched uranium and enriched reactors, which are forbidden for countries like Japan and Canada. So Japan is in a massive state. They've already, out of 52 nuclear reactors, they're down to 9. They're not replacing them. The meltdown, all the problems with Japan, that comes from not being able to move towards any more enrichment. Those old reactors needed to be decommissioned a long time ago. Japan's worked on trying to keep them alive as long as humanly possible because it was done before non-proliferation agreement. You see, people like to make narratives and ignore all the truth and all the facts. Canada is in dire straits. We have the ability to do what all these other G7 countries have to do, which is go into natural gas, go into all these things. But somehow, in some way, shape, or form, Canada said, oh, no, all our leaders, which makes no economical sense. Russia will tell you it's ludicrous what not only the prime ministers of Canada have been up to and doing, but what the premiers of the provinces, the regions are doing. A lot of people like to focus on federalism, solely federalism, and ignore all regionalism. We have corrupt premiers signing deals on nuclear, unenriched, small reactors that cost just as much as a giant plant. Did you know that, Canadians? You're buying little crappy, portable little package nuclear power plants that cost the exact same amount overall than a big full-scale plant. And you can't enrich, even though it comes out of the ground. Right here in Canada, we have 10,000 times more than all of the P5 put together in this world. That means Russia, USA, France, UK, and China add all of their sources of highly enriched uranium ore, and you will find Canada has 10,000 times more than them. Highest quality in the world. But we are not allowed to use it. We are to remain uncompetitive in energy, clearly in nuclear, just like every other non-P5 nation. And we're supposed to jump on board with energy transition, get rid of coal, natural gas, all of it, even though that's in super plenty in Canada. We're not even 40 million people yet, but somehow with our vast resources, we're not to use them, utilize them in any normal way. We're getting rid of oil, which is abundant here in Canada. We can't interprovincially trade or create corridors or anything else regionally because that isn't a good idea. Energy independence isn't a good idea, even though clearly that's what Germany's doing, that's what Spain's doing, and clearly, unless Japan's planning to sink right into the ocean, they are going to be having to do that too, and importing it. And here we are talking about how we can't do anything because although we have all the resources any country in the world would die for, we're to keep those locked away. We're to transition into non-economically viable systems that are not even competitive, not even close to anything else in the world. And no other country in the world is doing that except Canada. Again, I'm going to say it. Canada, why have you only sold 10 of your reactors in the whole world? And in the Green New Deal, why is nobody buying CANDU reactors? Why is unenriched uranium not economically viable throughout the entire world? Why does nobody want to transition to that? Because it's not economically viable. You're better off with coal, natural gas, and all the rest of it. That's the absolute 100% truth. The only reason why Ontario has this abundance, and we see it in New Brunswick, is because a prime minister made that happen through equalization and what's called centralization. If it wasn't for that great socialist centralized system, none of this would even be alive today. But can it go throughout Canada? The answer is no, it can't. Because there's not enough people to subsidize the industry. There's just not enough taxpayers. You start putting that up all over Canada, and Houston, we got a problem. There's nobody who can actually pay for this. And then those credit rating people come in again and say, sorry, Canada, you were a net producer of energy and resources. Now you're a net needer. We're going to have to downgrade. Check mark, check mark, check mark. Sorry, you're not transitioning to anything viable. You owe a lot of money throughout the world. You've got to a point where you're printing money. Canadians, you're being devalued at an incredible rate. Now, conservatives talk about this too. However, if you read their economic policies, their shadow finance going forward budget policy for the new Canada, it's exactly the same as the Liberals with few variations. What they say and they condemn the Liberals for, they're doing it too. We are not seeing any kind of real change for the positive Canada. It's exactly the opposite. No one's going to talk to you about it. Everybody's going to keep up with the same narrative that everything's hunky-dory. Just stay on this road. Venezuela road or Palestine road. I hear all kinds of radical groups coming forward. People ask me, oh, talk about this person, talk about that group. What for? Why give anyone a stage? Canadians, wake up, because I'll tell you, when people start telling you, leave the UN, I've said it many, many times, there are 7 countries in dire straits outside of the UN. Vatican City doesn't count. It doesn't count. The Catholic Church has many ties to many strong nations who have consolidated that church into their government. They're not going anywhere. They have a rich history. They were on the right side of World War I and II. They're changing directions now. At least the Pope's calling for it. But that's not reality. And anyone telling you that we're going to leave the UN and become a better country, stronger, we're going to get away from all these narratives, I have a news flash for you, everybody. Canada leads on NWO. Your greasy, corrupt system, colonial system, inherited from an age long gone, a world dead, a world of Axis powers. That's what we're following here in Canada. Many people are waking up to it. They try to say communism. They try to say, oh, it's Nazism. And some of those narratives are true. But where did they originally come from? I can tell you, it's Age of Empires, the colonial system. Axis powers were all the countries that were Axis powers, i.e. colonial powers themselves. There were 7 in this world. The League of Nations is gone, everybody. Trying to go back to that, Canadians and groups or political parties talking about nothing about you, the people, or rights of the people really enshrined or real constitutionalism, and they talk about taking the crown for themselves, and when you address that, they go, oh, no, I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is my power, my system, me, I'm a crown power. That's what everyone's talking about. Every party. They don't tell you anything that's truthful. It's all a variation of, when I get the crown, I'm going to run you all into the ground. It's going to be my vision of the world. The worst thing is a party saying they're going to leave the UN. Palestine is not allowed in the UN. Ask any country in the world what it was like before the UN and the rights and freedoms your country has, the absolute sovereignty. Now, Canada constitutionally throws away their sovereignty. We are very few, just a handful of over 200 nations in this world that has thrown away its sovereignty. And that's countries that don't even have UN recognition status, but they were smart enough to keep their sovereignty. The UN actually absolutely calls for you to have your sovereignty. That's world binding law. That's the law of this world today. That's why you don't see countries taking other countries over anymore. Notice how that doesn't happen, and when it does, world powers go to war over it. Countries fight over it. Now, people have claims to territories, they have their ideas, but reality is this, everybody. Look at who's presenting what their narratives are, where are you going in energy, what are you going forward with as the people, as a nation, what is the soul of your nation? Because I can tell you right now, Canada has given it away. The other G7 members are not transitioning to an unenriched nuclear state. They're not abandoning all other resources. In fact, it's the opposite, because they can't proliferate. That was the massive portion of this video. Canada, you can't proliferate. You can't transition into a Green New Deal. Solar and wind don't cut it. They're not there yet. They may never be there. You never, now I can promise you all this, you never make drastic economic decisions of your country based on what ifs. That's not how you run a business. That's not how you run a country. Well, hopefully in a few years, these technologies will take off. The EU already went through it. Germany already went through it. France already went through it. All these other countries went through it. Italy, Spain, all these other countries, a lot of members of the EU went through this epic failure and since have gone back to the drawing board, back to what works, back to what is, not what isn't. Because your economy will not last on what ifs and what isn't. And Canada's going with what ifs and what isn't, buying outdated old systems that don't function and may never function. Business owners understand this. You can't make a case on what ifs or maybes or delusional dreams. You have to have something viable that people want to buy. Nobody wants to buy CANDU or unenriched processes of uranium. That's a reality. You can subsidize it all you want throughout the entire world, but nobody's buying into it. They haven't bought into it for a very long time. The Green New Deal's going forward, and no one's buying into it. I don't see the orders coming out the window. It's over. It's over, and we have to start looking at reality. Now, if you don't want to do coal, then it's going to have to be natural gas, and that should be getting expanded across Canada. But that's not happening. We should be trading on the world stage for all these countries who wish to import these energy sources. Japan's going to be needing it. UK's going to be needing it. The entire EU is going to be needing it. The Middle East, Southeast Asia. Why is it, Canadians, we have a Bill C-48 and a Bill C-69? Why is it, with our massive resources, our ability to generate wealth, this isn't available on the world stage? Because I can promise you, global demand has only gone up. Canada's cut down its share of a market, which is a primary industry, which is a GDP generator. Why are we borrowing $300 billion a year to stay afloat in Canada? Governments, both left and right and center, are all promising some kind of transition into a new world that nobody else is following. Nobody. The only people who have to follow are people without the resources, very poor countries in this world. They don't have the natural resources to make any kind of impact in that area. They have to look for alternatives. They have to utilize alternatives. And because that's very limited, their economies are limited. Where is Canada going to be if we continue on this road that proves to be uneconomical and unviable? Nobody has any data to support that wind and solar are going to take over for Canada. Nobody has any data that it's even possible, remotely close to possible, to transition into hydrogen fuel and hydrogen fuel cells outside of fully proliferated nuclear power plants. There's no can-do system to get you there. There's no package nuclear to get you there. We are buying other people's throwaways. Why is Canada doing that? Why are taxpayers being forced to do that? When every other country in the world with sovereignty, with the love of their people, says, get bent, I'm not buying any, but yet Canada continues on. Why is Canada the only one buying into this? Why? Well, that's because of our crown colonial system, our very limited constitution that not only throws away our sovereignty, which is world binding in this world, every country is supposed to enshrine sovereignty, nation sovereignty. Canada already throws that away. Because our Constitution also gives supremacy to the politician. You, the people, don't exist in your Constitution. All First Nations people don't exist in the Constitution. And because of that, and zero accountability of the politician, no rules of governance or how to govern, any country in the world can come knocking on Canada's door, throw millions of dollars into all your politicians' pockets, from left to right, and pay them off to absolutely rape, pillage, and plunder you. And why not? Who wouldn't? Whether you're a billionaire, a multinational, an oligarch, a dictator, a tyrant, any country or a full-scale democracy can come in here, pay off your politicians, and let them rape, pillage, and plunder you. Because there is no we the people. There's no supremacy of God, it's supremacy of the politician. And they will sell you Canadians out every time. They have been for many, many decades. It's just the fact that it's getting so bad. Canadians are so blind to this, they don't look at the rest of the world in real international analysis, economics, legal, none of it. And we're told by a media paid by the government, this is good for you, don't listen, all those people are bad. The truth is not the truth you're going to hear. You're going to hear our divinity of politician truth. That's what you're all going to get, and you're going to learn to live with a lot less. And then they'll be talking in 5 years why we're a second grade country, then we're a third world country, and it'll be everybody else's fault. You'll all be blaming the UN, you'll be blaming multinationals, you'll be blaming oligarchs, tyrants, and oh, poor Canada, it wasn't our fault, we're just too nice. The politicians did the best they could, but this New World Order led by none other than Canada and Canada's politicians, who have absolute supremacy and divinity over all of you. If you believe in God, I'm sorry, immigrant for sure, who swears that oath, you swear to the divinity of your politician. They're your God. That's what you swear your oath to, your allegiance. You put your God, whoever that may be, whichever religion you come from, down here, and you turn around and give that power to the politician. Canadians do it too, they just don't know any better because they're not born to swear that oath. It's there, but they don't know it. You're legislated that way. The Constitution says that's how things run here. But most Canadians have no clue. Why would they? They've never ever read the Constitution. They've never ever sat down and read the Constitution. 97% of Canadians have never even looked at the Constitution of Canada. Let alone look at every constitution worldwide, and they would learn that their country is vastly different than almost every other country in the world, regardless of governmental systems, which is an issue too. Constitutional monarchies have no place in this world today, especially with colonial embedments, and that is Canada, 100%. Thank you, everybody. That's my video today. Got things to do, 8 o'clock, and, well, I got the day off now, I guess. Hopefully, tomorrow's a different story. I don't know. Okay, have a great day. Share, share, share. It's important. Bye now.